Welcome to the April edition of BBRO BeetCast. I'm Francesca Broom, your host and Knowledge Exchange Manager for BBRO. Last month we commented on the good soil conditions and how we were hoping for just a little bit of rain and warmth before the drills start to roll. Well, we've had snow, sunshine and enough intermittent rain, but not quite in the right order to get out in the field. But there is some hope there because the soil temperature is rising, and once the crop does go in the ground, we will see some quick establishment. And it's quick establishment that's going to be required for the new British Sugar early beet contract. So I spoke with British Sugar's Agricultural Director, Dan Green, to find out more about the contract and how this will work for both grower and processor. Welcome to your first BeetCast, Dan. I know you're exceptionally busy with grower meetings at the moment, so I'm glad you were able to join us on an audio version, and especially that we're going to talk about the newly launched early beet contract. So perhaps you can start by just telling us, why has this been offered?
So the contract is an area-based contract to take away some of the risk around the potential lower yields for the very early September lifting. So we've seen it as an opportunity in order to fulfil a problem that we have. We've lost a proportion of this year's crop, unfortunately, and it was already a crop that had suffered with the drought back in the summer, particularly throughout the berry area. So we're down on the amount of sugar that we need to supply our customer base over this year through until mid-September, and we want to be able to supply our customers and retain our customer base. So it's important to us that we look at all of the opportunities that are available to us to ensure that we have the supply of sugar that we need, and also give growers an opportunity who may have suffered through this year with loss of crop due to the frost or the drought even. Obviously support that and support our growers, and that's very much what we want to do going forward in terms of offering these opportunities to them and supporting the industry.
Yeah. But surely a short-term growing contract does carry some risks.
As we recognise that growing a crop of beet and lifting it in that very early September period will come with a yield penalty. So we've fixed the offer as a £3,000 per hectare offer, but with stipulations around exactly what the grower needs to do to comply in order to get that funding per hectare. And they're things like you need to establish a plant population of 80,000 plants per hectare.
And we hope we don't have too much of a dry summer, but has there been any push to make sure you've got some growers with irrigation amongst this group?
We haven't specified that as one of the terms and conditions, but my understanding is that there are one or two who've signed up for this that definitely have that capability.
And this is something we've never had to introduce before, so was there a blueprint from other countries that you were able to follow?
Not necessarily. I mean, we very much see it as working with our growers to do something that they're doing anyway with the rest of the crop that's contracted slightly differently, and it's really about just managing that yield penalty that we may or may not get at the start of September period, that very early period. Hopefully we'll see some very good yields, but if we have some of the weather that like we had last year, that may not be the case. So there's some risk attached to that, and this is us sharing in that risk in order to guarantee that we have that supply of beet into the factories in that very early September period.
We do know that from the Beet Yield Challenge that BBRO ran previous years, certainly in 2017 when the conditions were right, then 72 tonnes a hectare was not out of the question. So it is doable.
Absolutely, and I very much hope that we can do that again this year. And I believe that this contract, certainly on our part, is set up to align with what growers would normally do. So we expect growers to grow this crop in line with the rest of the crop that they will be growing for us, and that all of the same kind of best practice and things that they would normally do in terms of herbicide application, insecticide application, it will be very much similar to the rest of the crop and based on all of the best practice documentation that we have.
And how many hectares have you actually signed up to this project?
So we've capped this at 1,400 hectares, and we've now completely filled that contract to the max. So we've got, in fact, just over 1,400 hectares signed up to this.
And I understand, obviously, the seed orders went out some time ago, so there will be seed available to them, but at the moment it's going to be a mix of what's left and available, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So on the contracts that we've sent out, we've asked growers to choose the seed varieties that they would like from the available varieties that we have. It will all be non-cruiser treated seed because cruiser treatment has started and we're unable to get any more cruiser treated seed. But that's that shouldn't be a problem.
But there's nothing stopping a grower that's on one of these contracts to be able to swap their seed around to find the best seed for the best soil type and production that they need.
Yes, if they've got a treated variety that they want to use on one of these fields, then that's absolutely possible. They can switch varieties around to suit them if that's what they want to do.
And do you know whether you've got a similar soil type for most of the growers, or is it a complete mix?
It will be a mixture, so there's a slightly larger proportion of the area that is in around the berry factory. It's a berry factory only contract, but we will have growers growing it through quite a wide geographical area. Some growers that would normally be growing for Cantley, for Wissington, and even a couple further north than that.
Is there going to be extra support from the berry team in order to just help with the management of the crops?
Yes, so we're looking at what we need to do to make sure that we are keeping a close eye on this area that we've contracted in this way. We'll work with growers to help them and support them as we would do the remainder of the crop, and just ensure that all of the best practice that we have is being adhered to. In terms of the factory team, then clearly starting campaign probably 2 weeks earlier than we would normally means that there's a lot of planning and organisation that has to go into that in terms of managing people's holidays and setting the team up to have the factory ready for late August and into early September. So all of that planning and organisation has already started. So again, that's a slightly different approach and an impact on a different team. Something that we haven't necessarily done before, which will be different, and we'll learn from for the future.
So learning from the future, what about, it's a unique opportunity to actually map these contracts out, because you've got crops going in, they'll all be drilled by the 15th of April.
Hopefully, yeah.
In a similar area, so there'll be some difference, but probably not a huge difference if we're using mainly around the berry area. So are you going to map milestones of the crop as they go?
I think that's something we probably haven't fully thought through and made plans for yet. But as you say, it does represent a unique opportunity. We will have some resource allocated to this particular crop, and there's an opportunity for us to collect a bit more data about it and maybe draw some conclusions from that, having harvested it all by a certain date, or at least that's the intention. Yeah. Obviously, if the conditions are completely unsuitable in certain areas at certain times, then we'll consider that when it comes to it on an as needs individual basis.
But even if we don't quite reach your 72 tonne, the data that could be collected from there could be very valuable for the industry going forward, couldn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a unique response to a unique problem that we've had for certainly the first time in my 20 years in the industry. So I think that there will be those opportunities to continue to learn through that and see how we get on and use it to inform us of what we might do in the future.
And it's obviously been very popular because it took less than a week to fill all the slots.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a really an overwhelming response in the first 48 hours that this was open, and easily filled the area that we had available within that time. And unfortunately, we've had some growers that we've had to let down and not offer them this contract because we've been so oversubscribed for it. So that's disappointing. It's been a very interesting response, and I think shows how attractive the offer was.
Yeah, and I think everyone will be watching it very closely, because if it does do well and we can hit more than the 72 tonne a hectare, there'll be an awful lot of growers wondering if they can lift a little bit earlier in future years. So, we certainly would want to be supporting it with BBRO and helping growers to have attention to detail to try and hit those milestones and produce the best crop that they can.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting for us, and we've got, obviously the yield is important to everybody at that time of the year. There may also be some challenges around harvesting conditions, harvesting contractor availability, haulage availability. So we want to ensure that the crop turns up when we want it to. Those growers that want to organise private arrangements and ensure that is managed by themselves have an obligation to ensure that it turns up then. If people want to use our Beet delivery service for this, then they can get in touch with us, and we will aim to organise that in order to get the crop into the factory when we need it. So I think overall availability of haulage at that time of year can also be an issue depending on when harvest falls. Learnings from that, I'm sure, when we think about future start dates for factories, which obviously will always move year on year depending on the conditions, but all of those factors play a part in our thinking.
And assuming that we can lift in the time frame, the 4th or the 13th of September, once the factory's up and running, then you'll want the general commercial beet to be coming in as well, won't you?
Yes, once we're open from the 4th to the 13th, we'll aim to get this contracted crop in during that period, and then run straight into normal processing, allowing people to deliver towards the back end of that period, beet on the standard 1 year contract and the other multi-year contracts.
So obviously I know, Dan, you've got a really close working relationship with the NFU Sugar Board. When this idea was sort of being mooted around, did they have thoughts as well that supported you?
Yeah, the NFU have been really supportive of this, and having made them aware of the kind of situation we were facing, and then kind of better understood what the crop damage was this year, the NFU team put forward a proposal, and then we kind of shaped that into something slightly different that reflects what we've got today. So it was a collaborative approach. We've worked through a lot of the detail, the terms and conditions together very quickly, and come up with something that I think is as simple as it can be for our growers, in order to help them understand it and to get it out there quickly in order to meet the drilling window that's about to appear.
Yeah, and you needed to be reactive because the industry has to meet its obligations, and also growers are very keen to see the sugar beet crop do well for this year, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely, and it wasn't just us considering what needs to happen agriculturally. We had to consider the factories, what maintenance we'd got planned, and how all of this was going to fit together for the business as a whole before we could go out with it.
So you mentioned factories there. Why just berry factory?
So we predominantly thought about berry because of the sugar that we want to flow through to Silver Spoon. That's where the Silver Spoon packaging plant is. But the other considerations were also around what maintenance activities and capital project plans we've got at each of the sites. So, for example, Wissington have a large-scale capital project involving putting an additional evaporator into its plant this year, which will mean that it's difficult to get all of that work done and the factory commissioned for the start of September. The factory won't be available until slightly later in September, with all the work that we've got planned in.
And I'm assuming that there's still work ongoing at Cantley at the moment.
Yes, so following the issues we had at Cantley last campaign, there's a lot of work been going on to redesign the lime intake system, the limestone intake system, and that's all been done. And I was showing the NFU sugar team only yesterday the designs that we've had drawn up for that, and we've got some of the materials and things ordered for that, such that we can get it rebuilt in time for the campaign.
Well, thank you ever so much for your time, Dan. It's been great to have a little chat with you, and we will watch this project very closely and hope all the best for it.
Thank you very much. Good to talk to you.
Well, let's hope the April showers are kind to us and the crop is soon underway, especially for those of you that are undertaking the early lifting contracts. And as we're now in April, it's worth noting that the 2024 recommended list has now been released. It can be viewed via the BBRO website. As usual, the varieties will be available to see at the BBRO demo farm sites later in the year. And for those who require basis points, the reference number for March is CP/12521/2223/K, and for April it is CP/12572/2223/K. I hope you've enjoyed this month's BeetCast, and thank you for listening.